You know what is strange? We spend so much time talking about intelligence, like it is this golden ticket, this thing everyone should want. But nobody talks about what it actually feels like to live inside a mind that won't shut off, that questions everything, that exhausts you. They're the people who seem fine on the surface, sharp at work, quick with answers, always the one everyone turns to when things get complicated. But underneath that, there is something most people never see, and psychologists have spent decades trying to understand it. And here is what nobody tells you. What makes highly intelligent people different isn't what they know, it is how they feel. Maybe you felt it yourself. This sense that your brain is always running in the background, even when you are supposed to be relaxing. You pick up on things other people miss, the shift in someone's tone, the tension in a room nobody else seems to notice. You overthink conversations from 3 days ago. You lie awake rewriting arguments you already won. And in social situations, you sometimes feel like you are performing a version of yourself that other people find easier to be around. If any of that sounds familiar, it is not a coincidence, and the psychology behind it will change how you see yourself. So let's start with the brain itself, because that is where this whole story begins, and it is more complicated than most people realize. Neuroscientists have discovered something called the neural efficiency hypothesis. It basically means that highly intelligent brains don't work harder. They work differently. Where most brains light up like a fireworks show when solving a problem, a highly intelligent brain stays almost eerily quiet, using fewer resources to get better results. Psychologists call it cognitive efficiency, but in plain English, it means their brains are running cleaner, faster, with less noise. And that sounds like a gift, right? But here is the thing, that same efficiency comes with a cost nobody warns you about. Because a brain that processes faster also worries faster. It anticipates problems that haven't happened yet. It runs simulations constantly. Psychologists have a term for this. They call it intellectual overexcitability. It was first described by a Polish psychologist named Kazimierz Dabrowski, and Dabrowski didn't see it as a disorder. He saw it as a fundamental feature of how gifted minds experience the world, more intensely, more deeply, more painfully. Think of it like this. Most people have a volume dial that goes to 10. Highly intelligent people, their dial goes to 20, but there is no way to turn it down. Everything hits harder. Music, criticism, beauty, injustice. A casual comment from a stranger can replay in their mind for weeks. And here is what is fascinating. This isn't just about thinking, it is about feeling highly intelligent. People don't just have busy minds, they have deep emotions. A study published in the journal Intelligence found that people with higher cognitive ability scored significantly higher on measures of emotional sensitivity. They feel other people's pain more acutely. They absorb the emotional atmosphere of a room like a sponge, and they can't always explain why they're suddenly drained. Psychologists sometimes call this affective empathy on overdrive, but the people who live with it just call it exhausting. And this is where things get complicated, because that emotional depth creates a paradox that most people don't understand. Highly intelligent people crave deep connection. They genuinely want relationships that go beyond surface-level small talk and polite exchanges, but they also struggle with it, because the same mind that craves depth is the same mind that overanalyzes every interaction. Did I say too much? Did they actually mean what they said? Why did their tone change on that last sentence? Psychologists describe this as metacognitive monitoring, basically thinking about your own thinking in real time, and it never really stops. But the person experiencing it, they just know they can't enjoy a conversation without dissecting it afterward. And here is another thing nobody talks about. Highly intelligent people often struggle with something psychologists call the expectation trap. From a young age, they're told they're smart. Teachers praise them. Parents brag about them. The message is clear. You are gifted, so you should succeed at everything. And that sounds encouraging. But what it actually creates is a crushing fear of failure that follows them everywhere. Carol Dweck's research showed exactly this. When identity gets tied to being smart rather than to effort, every mistake feels like evidence that maybe you are not as intelligent as everyone thinks. Psychologists call it imposter syndrome, but the people living it just feel like they're one mistake away from being found out. So they overcompensate. They prepare obsessively. They triple-check everything. Not because they're perfectionists by nature, but because the stakes feel impossibly high. And that leads to something else, something people rarely connect to intelligence, and that is burnout. Not the regular kind of tired. A bone-deep exhaustion that comes from a brain that has been running at full speed since childhood, with no instruction manual for how to slow down. There is this weird paradox, where the very traits that make someone intellectually gifted are the same traits that make daily life harder than it needs to be. And let's talk about loneliness, because it is complicated. Highly intelligent people aren't necessarily introverts, and they're not antisocial. But they often feel fundamentally different from the people around them. They've learned to adapt, to match the energy of a room, to simplify their thoughts so they don't overwhelm people, to laugh at jokes they saw coming from a mile away. Psychologists call it social masking. This constant process of translating yourself into a version that fits the room. But the real cost is this. When you spend your whole life making yourself easier to understand, you start to wonder if anyone actually knows the real you. And that is the loneliness nobody talks about. Not the absence of people, but the absence of being truly known. But here is what is fascinating. And this is where the research gets really interesting. Highly intelligent people don't just think differently. They experience time differently. They have what researchers call an expanded temporal horizon. That means they're constantly holding the past, present, and future in their minds simultaneously. They're processing what happened, what is happening, and what could happen all at once. And that is beautiful in some ways. It is what makes them creative, insightful, deeply empathetic. But it also means they carry more weight than most people realize. They grieve things that haven't happened yet. They mourn possibilities. They feel the full weight of decisions that other people make casually. And that brings us to something important, something that changes how this whole conversation feels. Because here is what psychologists have also found. That same sensitivity, that same depth, that same exhausting intensity, it is also the source of their greatest strength. The research shows that emotional sensitivity and cognitive ability together create what psychologists call integrative complexity. The ability to hold contradictions, to see both sides, to find meaning where others see chaos. It is not a flaw, it is a feature. The wiring that makes everything harder is the same wiring that makes everything richer. The loneliness, the overthinking, the emotional weight, those aren't signs that something is wrong with you. They're signs that your brain is doing exactly what it was designed to do, processing the world at a depth that most people simply don't access. And maybe the most important thing psychologists have learned is this. Intelligence isn't just about solving problems faster. It is about feeling the world more fully, carrying it more honestly, and still choosing to stay open, even when closing off would be so much easier. That is not a burden. That is a gift. A complicated, exhausting, beautiful gift. And the people who have it, they don't need to be fixed. They need to be understood. They need permission to feel everything they feel without apologizing for it, without dimming themselves to fit in a room that wasn't built for the way they think. Because the world doesn't just need people who are smart. It needs people who feel deeply enough to actually care about what they're smart about. And if you've ever felt too much, thought too hard, or wondered why your brain won't give you a break, now you know why. You are not broken. You are just wired for depth in a world that mostly runs on the surface. If this hit home for you, please subscribe. And if you want to support these deep dives, hit that join button. I would genuinely appreciate your support because understanding yourself isn't a luxury. It is the beginning of everything.